Cool. Thanks again, Daniel. Yeah, really happy to be here. Pretty excited to share this information with you again. And as Daniel said, I'm a real estate agent. I'm with eXp Realty, licensed in both Oregon and Washington. I'm an expert, pretty well versed and experienced in all forms of real estate investing, whether it's wholesaling, flipping, rehabbing, retail buyers, retail sellers, buying and selling multifamily properties, commercial properties, sold a gas station recently. But what I've particularly fallen in love with is the house hacking concept, which is what I'm here to explain to you today. So, but please understand if you're in the area and looking for to do any real estate investing or purchasing single family homes as your home, we'd love to help you out with that down the road too. Quick disclaimer, honestly, to tell you, if I can get my clicker to work. Cue the awkward hold music. There we go. Okay. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA, a financial advisor, a mortgage broker, or any of those. So if you have questions about that, obviously seek professional advice in those areas. I can answer your questions when it comes to real estate purchasing and selling. Again, like we mentioned with eXp Realty, big on technology, equity, and revenue share. But, if we get right into it, what is the goal of this presentation and what are we going to go over? It's going to be, we're going to give you a context and a new perspective on some common financial concepts and help you understand the problem that house hacking helps to solve. Also, we're going to help you understand the details and the benefits of house hacking, how it works, why it's one of the most powerful wealth building tools available. And we may, if we have time, we may get into analyzing deals. So also, you'll understand how to get started. Daniel mentioned at the beginning of the call, I don't know if everybody was on, it's like, what are some actionable things that we can do to actually get started? And we're going to actually cover some of that today. We'll create a blueprint for house hacking and buying real estate. The blueprint will show you how it's possible to achieve financial independence, or FI or FI, however you want to pronounce it, in 10 short years with the house hacking strategy. So as we get into this, let's first talk about retirement and put that into the context of, a different viewpoint and understand the problem so that we can find an answer. If you look up the word retired and you Google it, you're going to get something that says leave one's job and cease to work typically upon reaching the normal age for leaving employment. And I added that emphasis there because I'm not a huge fan of this description. Cease to work. What if I want to continue to pursue my life's passion and, my big, hairy, audacious goals and work towards those? And then typically is fairly ambiguous, and so is normal age for leaving employment. Basically, if you distill all that down, it's living off a stream of passive income that meets or exceeds your expenses. So as we talk about income, different types of income, let's just define those quickly so that we're all on the same page. Income is basically money we make. Active income is money that we trade our time for. And then passive income is money we don't have to actively work for. One of the most pure forms of passive income is interest income that you get from the bank. You give the bank money, it sits there, the bank pays you pennies on the dollar to hold that money for you. So that's fairly passive. Now let's take a look at retirement in society's view of it. Society wants us to go to school, and it's always good to learn, get good grades, and then go to a good college. Now, here's where we start to run into some of the challenges in the direction that we're pointed by society. If you go to a good college or college at all, you're going to have student loans, which is a big hole in your bucket. I'm going to cover, I'll explain what a big hole in your bucket means in a little bit. And then you go to a good school, and then you want to get a good job with good benefits, like a 401k. And then you're going to retire when you're 62 and a half or 40 years typically, right? So what does good benefits mean, right? It's if you get a 401k that matches the first 5%, that's pretty solid. But we need to get into the 4% rule on, if you've heard of it or not, but the 4% rule is basically states that we can withdraw 4% of our portfolio value each year in retirement without incurring a substantial risk of running out of money. So let's dig into that a little bit. What's that actually look like? How much money do we have to retire? So imagine this. Imagine you're able to live off of $50,000 now, and in 40 years at 3% inflation, the equivalent of $50,000 today is living off of $163,000, right? Now, what is the nest egg you would need to be able to live off of the equivalent of $50,000 now in 40 years at the 4% rule? You would need over $4 million in liquid assets or in an account to be able to live off the equivalent of $50,000 now. Oh, but you say, you know, Social Security is going to be there for me. Well, I wouldn't plan on it. You know, you don't want to have to put all your eggs in one basket. Now, here's a really scary thought. Your savings rate have to be to build a $4 million portfolio if you want to retire at the age of 65 and maintain a comfortable standard of living in retirement. So I did a little research. This research I got here is from a CNBC article. So if you start at the age of 25, what you'll have to do is you're going to have to save 10 to 17% of your income. If you start at 35, then you're going to need to save 15 to 20% of your current income. And if you get a little bit of a later start, you know, that number just keeps going up. So based on our estimation, this is from that CNBC article, families aged 25 to 64 are currently only saving a median of about 6 to 8% of their income towards retirement. So the article goes on to say most American workers aren't saving at a level that will allow them to retire fully at 65 at their current standard of living. And that's actually Stanford Center of Longevity. So 7 in 8 Americans won't maintain a comfortable standard of living in retirement. Okay, so everybody think about that. Everyone on this call right now, only 1 in 8 of you are going to reach that $4 million nest egg. Think about 8 people you know. Only 1 in 8 of them are going to be able to maintain a comfortable standard of living. Are you? Because if you aren't, you know, you need to start taking action now. Okay, the next thing we'll put in context is financial independence. It's very similar, but it's slightly different than retirement. So if we define it, you know, the almighty Wikipedia says it's basically having enough passive income to cover your living expenses without having to work unless you want to, so you can pursue your life's passion, right? I like this one a lot more personally because I want to be able to work towards my life's passion when I'm ready. So again, the simple definition is when our passive income meets or exceeds our regular expenses. So similarities and differences between retirement and financial independence. So the similarities are, having trouble with my clicker. Passive income is greater than or equal to expenses. And then the differences are there's no age associated with financial independence. And then, you know, a question for you is, what do we want to do when we retire or achieve financial independence? And then hopefully that's pursue our life's passion. So here's another question for you to think about. When do you want to retire or achieve financial independence? How are you going to go about achieving that? Okay, so let's talk about the financial independence formula and what it is. It's pretty simple. It's surprising how simple it is. It's basically when our passive income is greater than or equal to our expenses, at that point in time, we've reached financial independence. Now, how do we get there? By turning our active income into passive income and controlling our spending, our expenses and our spending habits. So let's put something else into context real quick. Let's talk about money. The best way I've ever heard money explained is a bucket full of water analogy. Imagine we're holding a bucket, and you could call that your bank account, and it's full of water, which is the money. And the bucket has holes in it, and that money flows in and then out those holes. Big holes, money flows out quickly. Small holes, it doesn't go out quite as quickly. So there are two variables to how full our bucket is. You know, the income or the water coming in, it's the faucet, and then the expenses, and which is our spending habits, and those are holes in the bucket. Now, how big or small? Now, the whole presentation is based on this assumption. My assumption is that everybody on this call wants their bucket to either stay at the same level at worst, or ideally it continues to fill up. You don't want your bucket emptying out. If you don't agree with that, then this presentation probably doesn't make sense to you. But I want us to be filling our buckets full, and that's what this is all about. So into it a little more, how do we personally control how full our bucket is? You know, so how much water comes into it, you know, the income, the different types of income that we have, you know, both active and passive, and how quickly it comes in, and then how much water flows out of our bucket and how fast, and those are our expenses. Remember, we talked about student loans. Student loans are a big hole in the bucket, and they stay there for years, right? And then our expenses, how much we live on, and then our spending habits. If you have good spending habits, you have small holes in your bucket. If you have bad spending habits and you go out and spend money frivolously, big word, then your holes are going to be big and many, and it's going to be hard to keep money in your bucket. Okay, so the first financial independence question to ask is, which side of the FI equation can I have the greatest influence on right away? And then the next one is, do I know exactly how much money comes out of my bucket every month? So the B word comes up here. Budgeting is a must, and I've nerded out in budgeting. I could literally talk about it for hours. I use mint.com. It's a free website that's really good. I like it. I've been using it for 7 years probably, and I can track data 7 years back. So which side of the FI equation can have the greatest influence on right away? That's going to be the expenses side. Second financial independence question to ask is, how do I turn my active income into passive income? So listen, there are many, many ways to turn active income into passive income, and many different forms of real estate investing. And you know, with the experience I've got in wholesaling, flipping, rehabbing, buyers, sellers, etc., all that, house hacking is one that I'm really passionate about, and it's one I actually actively practice as well. So, because for folks like you, it might make a lot of sense to look into house hacking, maybe doing it, if not for yourself, then maybe for your kids. All right, so what is house hacking, and and how does it work? So house hacking, basically is a real estate investing strategy that helps you reduce your housing costs and get into the buy and hold real estate investing with relatively low financial barrier to entry, relatively low. Why is that? Well, it's because you would get a residential loan, and a residential loan for a property you're going to move into has a smaller down payment. So we'll get into a little bit more of that here in a second. So how it works is you're going to purchase a residential property of 1 to 4 units. In the eyes of a bank, if you purchase a property that you're going to move into of 1 to 4 units, it's considered your personal residence, and you can use the lower down payment options of a loan. The caveat or the must that you do is you must have the intent to move into this property, right? So you're going to live in 1 room or unit, and then you're going to rent out the rest, and you're going to apply those funds towards your mortgage payment. So imagine this: you have a mortgage payment that's a huge hole in your bucket, but you've got renters who are going to help pay towards that mortgage payment, so you've got more money coming in, so that hole essentially gets a little smaller in a sense. All right, so residential mortgage, let's talk about that, why they're very beneficial. So they have lower down payments and lower interest rates, typically by about 1%, 0.5, a half a percent to a full percent. So that's going to make a huge difference. Then if we look at the cost of a traditional investment property that you're not going to live in, that you buy strictly as an investment, you're going to have a higher down payment percentage, and it's going to be in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% down. And the interest rates, like we talked about, is about 1 percentage point higher than a residential owner-occupied loan. And for every $100,000 you borrow, that equals about $60 per month. The difference of 1 percentage point is $60 per month per $100,000 borrowed. So that might be hard to wrap your head around, but let's get into an example and see how that really looks, what that really looks like. So getting into numbers, let's pretend that you're going to purchase an $800,000 4-unit property. If you're going to use an investment mortgage, you're going to have to put 25% down, right? That is $200,000. Not a whole lot of people have $200,000 cash sitting there ready to go to buy an investment property. If you're going to live in the property and you want to use that residential mortgage, you can use an FHA loan at 3.5% down. That's only $28,000, only, I should say, right? It's a lot more palpable to think about $28,000 than $200,000. So really, if we go back and say, what's that mean in the context of money? Well, our money bucket has to be less full. We don't have to have as full of a money bucket in order to buy that asset. Okay, so now let's look at what if we were going to get an $800,000 loan? What is the cost of that, whether you're an investor or a homeowner? So remember, a lower interest rate by about 1%, and per every $100,000 you borrow, that equals about $60. So a residential loan would save you $5,760 per year, or $480 per month, or $120 per week. What could you do with an extra $120 per week? Well, if you invested it, what's the value in 30 years with a 10% return? That's worth over $1 million. Get you a little closer to your nest egg of $4 million just by making a smarter purchase. All right, so now we'll talk about lower cost of entry. You only have to save about, or a small percent relative to an ordinary investment property, but you still get to enjoy the benefits of appreciation. $1 million property is going to appreciate at the same rate, regardless of how much debt is owed on the property. All right, so more powers of house hacking means you have lower expenses, right? You can lower your cost of living, so if you lower your cost of living, it makes that hole in your bucket smaller, so you can save money faster because money isn't going out as quickly. And then it helps you save for future investments to help fill the bucket faster, which helps you save for more investments, which helps fill the bucket faster. And it's this upward cycle. Obviously, if you own an investment property, you have increased income. And so you buy the property, you're going to live in it for a little bit, and then you're going to move out, but you're going to keep the property. And after moving out, it should produce monthly cash flow, which, you guessed it, fills the bucket faster. And then it will help expedite the process of purchasing more assets that produce more passive income. And then also, the tenants are paying down your mortgage payment, which is thus building your equity. All right. The big debate, do I rent or do I buy? Let's add a third variable in there and say, should I house hack? So let's look at their effect on money and the financial independence equation. So we're going to kind of put them side by side and look at it. So we'll do just a pretend case study. And the basic assumptions is we're going to look at a 10-year time frame, right? And then in that 10 years, you will eventually live in a single family home. So at the end of 10 years, we're going to say you're going to live in a single family home. We're going to say that rent increases at 5% a year. And then this is kind of silly, but if you take out the last year, this is true. Real estate appreciates at about 4.2% per year. We're going to say that's what it appreciates at in our assumptions, but the historical average is closer to 7 or 8% if you take away 2021 and 2020. So we'll just, those are outlier years in a weird real estate market, but we'll do that. And then we're going to assume the mortgage payment stays the same. Our mortgage payment goes up every year because the property taxes usually go up, but I couldn't figure out that formula in Excel to increase it by so much every year. Plus, municipalities raise their property taxes at different rates, right? We're not all Portland where we raise them 3% a year. So we're going to just make the mortgage payment stay the same every year. And then we're going to say that the 1% rule is 0.66. Okay, so, well, what in the world is the 1% rule? If you don't know, the 1% rule is basically a quick calculation used to determine a baseline of the quality of a deal, right? So it's like, if you want to look at a deal and you want to be able to do a back of the napkin equation to calculation to see if it's a good deal, you use the 1% rule. And here's the equation. You take the gross rents for all the units and you divide it by the purchase price. Right, so let's hypothetically, let's say that a duplex purchase price is $450,000, and each unit would rent out for $1,500. So the gross rents are $3,000. So if you take $3,000 and divide it by $450,000, that's 0.66. So that's the equation that we're going to use as we go through this. By the way, in the Portland market, Vancouver's slightly different. The average output of the 1% rule is 0.5. All right, so let's pretend that you are going to rent and you're going to end up renting for 10 years. So the assumptions are your monthly rent is going to be, oh, I got to fix something real quick here. The monthly rent is going to be $1,500 per year. And then at the average of 5% increases a year, it'll be $23.25 in year 10. And then, so your yearly housing cash flow, which is the money that you will pay to live there, is $18,000 in year 1. And in year 10, it's almost $28,000. So we're going to just plug these numbers into this table. And you're going to see that your housing cash flow after 10 years accumulated is almost $250,000 just out of your pocket. No loan balance, no property value, no equity because you don't own any property. Difference in housing and equity is you've paid out, $226,000, and your annual cash flow for year 10 is 0 because you're not collecting any money from any renters. Okay, that's cool, nice table, but here's what that actually looks like. You're doing nothing but paying out money. Now, people say, well, if you buy a house, it's a lot smarter investment. And I would tend to agree. So again, let's look at all this stuff. Let's pretend that you're going to buy a house for $400,000. The down payment is 3.5%. And your mortgage payment is $2,145 a month, or every year it's about $25,000. So after 10 years, you will have paid out a little over $257,000 to own that house. Your loan balance will have gone down to $301,000, but the property value has appreciated significantly from $400,000 to $603,000. Now, the equity you have in it is $300,000, so you've got a little bit of money in your pocket. And then the difference between the housing and the equity numbers is $44,000. So if you were to sell that house and collect that equity check of $302,000, you would have paid out $257,500 to get that $302,000. So you would have made money over the 10-year span. Annual cash flow per year, again, is $0 because you're not renting it out. Okay, so now let's get into house hacking, and here's the hypothetical situation. You're going to buy a duplex and you're going to live in it for 2 years. After you live in it 2 years, you're going to buy a single family home and live in it after that. Here's what that looks like. So the purchase price of the duplex is $450,000. 2 years later, you would buy your single family home at $433,000. because remember that $400,000 property has appreciated up to $433,000 over 2 years. Down payment's 3.5% on both. The mortgage payment for the house hack is $2,400. The mortgage payment for the single family home is $2,300. And then there's the yearly payments. We're going to assume that the rent on each side is $1,500 for the duplex, and then it increases at 5% a year. Keep in mind that during year 1, you're going to collect rent from just one side of the duplex, as is the same in year 2. So it'd be $1,500 a month. In year 3, when you move into the single family home, that rent or the what you collect increases to $3,000 a month because you're collecting on both sides. So after 10 years, your housing cash flow is negative $92,000. So your out of pocket for your living expenses has come much closer to zero. Remember, with your single family home, you paid out over $250,000 to live there. Now that number's coming down a little bit. Your loan balance, you own 2 properties, so you owe almost $700,000, but the property value between the 2 properties is now worth almost $1.3 million. So your equity is a nice number at pushing $600,000. So the difference now between how much you've paid out and how much you've made in equity is $500,000, simply by buying one duplex, living in it for 2 years, and then buying a single family home. By the way, in year 10, you're collecting $27,000 a year in passive income from that one duplex. All right, so let's add a little gasoline to the fire and have some fun with this. So let's say that you buy a duplex, you live in it for 2 years, and then you decide to do it again. So you buy another duplex and live in it for 2 years. And then after you've done that, you've had enough, you want to buy a single family home and live in it. So here, you've house hacked twice and you have a single family home. Here's all those same numbers and how they break down. Purchase price for the duplexes and for the single family home. The down payments are 3.5%, and the mortgage payments are all right there. And then your rents for each side, basically all the same assumptions. But here's how the numbers work out. Your housing cash flow, you have now been paid to live instead of having to pay out money. Yeah, your loan balance goes up to $1.1 million, but the property value is almost $2 million. Equity starts to look pretty nice. You're approaching $750,000 in equity. Here's where it's exciting. Remember, the difference between housing and equity used to be the equity minus the housing number, housing cash flow. Now, because the housing cash flow is positive, they add up. So you're at $780,000 in equity, in the difference, excuse me. And your cash flow, now you're at $52,000 a year. So the question becomes, do I rent or do I house hack? So I wanted to really dig into this when I was putting this presentation together for you guys. So let's check this out. Here's a table with a lot of these numbers, but I also went and looked at, well, what if you house hacked 3 times, or what if you did it 4 times? So let's just look at how all this shapes up. By the way, somewhere in between house hacking once and house hacking twice is where you live for free. All right, so after 10 years, if you were to rent, you would have no loan balance. Single family home, you're going to own $300,000. House hacked and single family, you're going to own $687,000, 1.1. If you decided to house hack 4 times and have a single family home, you would owe the bank $2 million. But let's look at the property value on these now. So this comes up, and the numbers start to get pretty big, but the equity portion of it gets pretty exciting, right? So equity with a single family home is at 302. If you house hack once, it's almost 600. House hack twice, it's almost $750,000. House hack 3 times, it's at $1 million, and then house hack 4 times, you're at $1.1 million. Then you start to look at the differences in equity of all this. Now, let's do a hypothetical situation. Let's say you're sitting at either your high school graduation or your college graduation, and you're sitting next to a friend, and you're chatting. It's like, hey, what are you going to do the next 10 years, and you're both going in separate directions, and you're going to go live and work. And you run into that person 10 years later, and let's say you both had about the same job, made about the same money, and you ask your friend about their living situation. It's like, yeah, I really liked where I was at. I was living in a nice place downtown. I was close to all the exciting stuff. Had a great time. And they ask you what you did, and you're like, well, this one guy gave a presentation on house hacking. I didn't know if it was a very good idea, but I decided to do it anyways. I house hacked twice, and then I bought a single family home. And he looks at you kind of strange, but here's the rub. He may think that you did a bunch of stuff, but the difference between him renting for 10 years and you house hacking twice and then buying a single family home is $1 million decision. Now, if you were to remember, if you house hack after your annual housing cash flow, if you really get after it and you're going to house hack 4 times and then live in a single family home, you are approaching 6 figures in passive income after 10 years, right? And then, so if you house hack twice, if you think back to our nest egg that you need, if you want to live off of the equivalent of $50,000, inflation has gone up a little bit, will have gone up over those 10 years, but you would have to house hack maybe 3 times, plus or minus 3 or 4 times, in order to have that amount of cash flow to reach financial independence, all by just house hacking. So you're interested in house hacking, you want to do it, and now you need to go analyze deals. So let's start analyzing deals. And
hey, Chase, do you want me to interrupt with questions, or do you want me to hold them to the end?
Let's hold them to the end, because it's possible I might answer them as we go on. But thanks for asking. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, so what's an acceptable deal in our market? And I'll speed things up to make sure that I've got time for questions. So an acceptable deal in our market is, ideally, you want to lower the cost of housing. So basically, the mortgage payment less than rent collected equals your cost of housing. And it needs to be cash flow neutral when you move out at current market rents. So the current rents have to be greater than or equal to the mortgage payment. Okay, so what makes a better deal? Now we start getting into stuff that's like, what's the condition of the property? What condition are you looking for in a property? What are the current rents versus the market rental rates, especially here in Oregon, because we're only allowed to increase them somewhere between 9 and 10% a year. So how much rent a property collects relative to its market rent really affects the value, as I'm sure you guys have discussed, ROI and cap rates and that stuff. Then location, so proximity to jobs, schools, transportation, desirable areas, crime rates, development, etc. So when my wife and I looked for a duplex, here was ours. I don't have a lot of time to go through this, so I'm going to kind of just breeze over it. You can email me and we can set up a time to chat. But we were looking for a good location. We were looking for a duplex. The unit makeup wasn't a huge thing. We just wanted, more bedrooms on each side, the better. Condition of property, we wanted something that was close to turnkey or ready to move in. And we had to have one of them with either a vacant unit or a tenant on month to month. We didn't want a property on double yellow lines because we didn't want a busy street. And of course, it needed to be cash flow neutral. And our monthly costs, mortgage had to be less than the rent collected if we were to not move in. So it had to be cash flow neutral. And then, covering operating expenses. So how do you get started? Here you go, Daniel. Here is your action plan on how you can actually get started. And could you get started today? Yes. What's most important, and I fight this in a lot of things I do, is I have to decide it's possible, and I have to go out and find evidence that people are doing it and people are successful at doing it. And then you have to decide why you want to do it. It is a lot of work to house hack. We are in the process of renewing a lease with our tenants on the other side, and they're going through a discussion of who's going to stay, who's going to leave, and you end up kind of being in the middle of that, but we have to step out of it as much as we can. So you have to decide why you're doing it. You know, decide, is the payoff worth the pain? And are you willing to go through the growing pains so that you can live a life that not many other people can live? And decide that it's time to take action. And you know, there's the saying, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. Second best time, today. Okay, so if you're looking to get started, what's the reality of the action plan? Is you need to find a lender and get pre-approved. And then, so there are loan programs for first-time home buyers. If you're looking to buy a single-family home where they're going to cover all the costs, you know, you can find a non-occupant co-borrower. If you can't qualify for the property all on your own, you can find a non-occupant co-borrower. You can find a realtor to show you houses, and then you write offers. You get an offer accepted. Not really easy in today's market, and then you close the deal. So that's in reality how you get started. If you wanted the recommended get started action plan, learn to track your money and credit score, request your free credit score from the 3 different credit bureaus to see where you're at, figure out your long-term investment strategy and how house hacking will aid you in achieving that, or, you know, writing out a business plan for not only for you, but for your investors as well. And then you contact professionals to help you refine your strategy and get started. And those 2 people are going to be a realtor, and it's also going to be a lender. And you need to have your realtor connect you with a lender to help you refine things. Do not go to an online lender because they're going to give you lower rates. Speaking from experience, we have had deals that look like they were smooth sailing and we're going to close on time, only to have an online lender, Rocket Mortgage, you know, you name it. If you find them online, be careful. Only to have that deal go absolutely sideways because we couldn't get the lending or the loan officer to answer the phone because we needed them to sign off on a box, and the deal nearly fell through. Really be careful about online lenders. They might charge you 1/8 of a point less, but realize that it's likely that that deal could fall through from an online lender. They're not all bad, just had personally bad experiences with almost everyone I've done. And then understand your numbers, understand your market, run your numbers. Okay, so the blueprint to retire in 10 years. You know, get your mindset right, believe and start. Financial education, and you can see this picture here on the right. It's got a really deep hole. They're building a skyscraper. So the higher you want to build, the deeper you have to go with your foundation. So you really need to have your mindset right and, you know, read books and get financially educated on how money works and how to grow your wealth. Do some business planning for yourself and some investors, understand the market, run your numbers, and then build your team. So the action plan becomes get pre-approved, search for properties, make a purchase, and then learn from that experience, and then rinse and repeat. We went through a lot of stuff extremely quickly. Some other resources you can have. You can go to mrhousehack.com. That's my website. You can find info on house hacking there, and then you can also find qualified agents in your city if you're not in the Portland, Oregon, or Vancouver, Washington areas. You can email me. We can do a 15-minute consultation in your area or for you, or again, we can find a realtor in your area. You can check out Mr. House Hack on Facebook. You know, other websites like we talked about for budgeting are mint.com, and Personal Capital is another good one. Personal Capital, Mint is more for budgeting. Personal Capital is tracking your net worth. Podcasts are, you know, the Bigger Pockets Money podcast is really good. And then Choose at Fi is another great one. So you can follow Mr. House Hack on Instagram as well. So with that, I will happily open it up to questions as I stop sharing.
All right. There was a question a little ways up, and apologies that I don't have the name of the person, but they asked, do you have any recommendations for house hacking with a family?
If they are available, I would like to pick their brain a little bit and ask them a few more questions to get a little better context. So if they're here, go ahead and feel free to unmute and ask, and I can answer that question. As they're finding their voice or you're finding them, I can give you a little bit of information on it. Is it possible to house hack with a family? Absolutely. Is it easier to do it single? Maybe, if you make enough income. It's just, you need to decide, is it worth kind of the growing pains and the trouble, so to speak, of house hacking with a family. If you have two income producers, then it's easier to qualify for a house. There are, I don't know how many of you are here local in the Hillsborough area, but there are duplexes in the Hillsborough area that are giant, meaning each side has 3 bedrooms, 1.5, or even 2 bathrooms with a garage. So, you know, you find a 1,400 square foot home, and you know, you can live in there. My wife and I have a duplex. We're in Milwaukee, Oregon, and each side's a 2-1. We have about 880 square feet each side. We have a, you know, the property is, the 2 units are separated by garages, so we do share a wall with our tenants, but we don't. It's just the garage wall. Yeah, we've heard some strange noises come through there every once in a while, but it's like, yeah, that's fine. You're covering 70% of our mortgage payment. Are we going to deal with hearing weird noises once, maybe twice a year? Sure, that's fine with me. So is it possible? Yes. You need to get your spouse on board. That is crucial and easier said than done sometimes. But yes, it is possible to house hack with a family.
I would also add to that I think a lot of things in real estate really come down to mindset. And, you know, do you view it as a terrible inconvenience, or is it an adventure? Is it something that you're doing together and having fun doing, or is it something you're dragging your family through? And so oftentimes just changing your mind about how you view things. Like, I personally, if I go on a diet, it never happens. But if I change my lifestyle and try to change my eating habits, you know, I'm more effective that way. So I just have to change the way I think about things.
I couldn't agree more. My wife and I updated both sides of the duplex, and I won't lie, I didn't particularly enjoy it because my mindset wasn't right. We saved a ton of money doing it. We gained valuable experience. I just wasn't just like you said, Daniel, my mindset wasn't right. I needed to probably shift it.
All right. There's a question, and you mentioned this earlier. You can get started today, but can you comment on this strategy in the peculiar market conditions that we're currently experiencing?
Yeah, excellent question. You know, everybody is in the same boat if we're looking to buy properties, and that inventory is incredibly low. So it's just really, really, the competition is stiff, and there's not a lot of opportunities out there. Are there good opportunities? It depends on how you look at the purchase and how far forward you're thinking regarding that. You know, when we go to buy a house now, people have a hard time swallowing the fact that you mean I have to pay $50,000 over asking. It's like, well, yes, in many cases you do, but if you're going to live in the house for 6 or 7 years, then it starts to make sense to maybe pay a little more for it. Now, when we are buying something to house hack in, what is our long-term strategy with that home, right? If you're able to get one under contract and buy it, then and you're going to hold on to it for 5 or 10 years, the amount that you pay, while it still is important, is, I don't know, a little less important, for lack of a better explanation. And what I mean by that is that rents are going to continue to appreciate, right? Rents continue to appreciate regardless of the market cycle that we're in as far as purchase price goes. Also, when we look at purchasing properties, what a lot of people get tripped up on is the sticker price. And as investors, we know better than to look at the sticker price. I'm looking at the monthly price or monthly cost to own that property, and then I'm running numbers based on that, right? Because as we're seeing interest rates go up in this market, that's affecting purchasability. You know, so like if you owned a shack, I'd buy it from you for $10 million if you let me pick my terms. You know, I'm going to do 0% for 10,000 or for 100 years, and there's a balloon payment due at 100 years, but if I die, I don't have to pay it. and then I can transfer it to my heirs. And I essentially got your shack from you. I told you, you can see how that you can manipulate the terms to be in your favor to make it look good for both people. But what I'm getting at is we need to make sure that the numbers make sense. And if you're going to live in a property to house hack, what does make sense? You want to make sure that you lower your cost of housing in most scenarios, right? If you're living in a rental house right now, and let's say it's a 2-1 apartment in Hillsborough, and you're paying, shoot, I don't know, that might be going for $1,500 a month, maybe, probably closer to $2,000. So then if you could find a duplex that you buy, even if it's $700,000, and that mortgage payment is, I don't know, $4,000 a month, yeah, I'd be close to that. And the other side is rented out at $2,000 a month, and you're paying $2,000 a month. In my mind, that passes the bar to make the purchase, because your monthly housing costs haven't gone up, and you're going to be able to increase your rents over time, and then you're also going to enjoy the appreciation in the market. So it's tough in this market. Yes, if you have a long-term mindset of building wealth through real estate and acquiring properties, awesome. And as the market appreciates, then that $700,000 duplex goes up as well. And when the market dips or corrects itself, which markets have cycles, then you just hold on to it. And because the rents cover the mortgage payment, who cares if the value drops a couple $100,000? All that does is extend your holding time while you're still collecting cash flow from it.
All right, there's a question about, is anyone eligible for an FHA loan, or perhaps better to say it a different way, what are the qualifications for an FHA loan?
Great question. So of course I have to preface this with, I'm not a lender. To my understanding, just about anybody is qualified for an FHA loan, with one caveat that you can only have one FHA loan to your name at any one time. So you can't go out and buy a duplex tomorrow, own it, and then go try and buy another one 2 years later with an FHA loan also. You would actually have to refinance out of that FHA loan, turn that FHA loan into a conventional loan, but if you're still living there, you get the good interest rates, and then go buy another property with an FHA loan. I'm really glad that you asked that question, because if you don't get the lending and financing aspect of it set up before you start, you will paint yourself in a corner, and it takes a lot longer to get started. What a lot of people do is, and this is what my wife and I are doing, spouse one will buy the first property in their name, and they'll use either a conventional or an FHA loan. But let's say spouse one buys it with an FHA loan. A year or two later, spouse two buys the next one with an FHA loan. Because they're not on this first one, because they're not on title or on the mortgage, they still have their FHA loan available to them. So then they buy the next one. And then a couple years later, when they're ready to buy again, they refinance the first one out of an FHA into a conventional. So spouse one has their FHA available to them again, and spouse one buys property number 3. And then when they're ready to buy again, spouse B refinances and then buys property number 4. I hope that made sense. It made sense to me, but that's not what matters. Did it make sense to you, Daniel?
I think so.
I was going to say you're speechless. So.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I gotcha.
All right. One of the questions, this is a quick one. What's the minimum amount of time I can spend in a property in order to do this?
Okay, again, not a lender, but the lender says that you need to intend, gray area, to live in the property for a year.
All right. And then we have another question on, does equity really matter for FI? It seems that cash flow is more important.
You're 100% right in that cash flow is what's important. However, it begs the question, well, could I turn my equity into cash flow? Daniel, you know the answer to that. Daniel, if you had $1 million in equity in a rental property and the cash flow was pretty low, what would you do?
I would sell that property and put it into one, or refinance potentially, and put it into one that had better cash flow.
Or put it into mini that had cash flow.
Yeah.
1031 exchange out of that puppy. Go buy a cash flowing property or properties or apartment complex in the Midwest where you can actually achieve the 1% rule. And, I've got a talk where exactly that, how to build cash flow in high appreciation, low cash flow markets. So yes, equity does matter because you move that equity from one asset into many assets. Honestly, what we're doing here is we're playing Monopoly. That one little greenhouse is going to grow, and you're going to turn it into 2, turn it into 3, turn it into a hotel. So yeah, you could purchase four duplexes in the span of 10 years. Would you just sit there with them to, enjoy that $96,000 a year? You could, and that would go up, but you could also cash in on that equity from that first duplex and then buy, an 8-unit apartment complex somewhere else that's got a bunch more cash flow. And then you could sell the second one and do the same thing, and it just snowballs and gets bigger and bigger.
And we've only got 3 minutes left. So first of all, feel free. I know you shared your contact information there, but if you want to put it up, feel free to do so. Sure. We also have a question, and you're not a tax advisor, but what about the tax implications of this strategy? Great question.
So we just submitted our taxes. Half of it is viewed as an investment property, and the other half is our primary residence. So in all honesty, it gets pretty sticky quickly. So we pay someone to do our taxes. When we go to sell our property, we when it's sold, then we won't get into the homestead exemption here, but half of it is viewed as your primary residence, where you can collect up to, for us, it'll be $500,000 of equity without having to pay taxes on it. The other half will be looked at as an investment property, and we'll have to pay taxes on the gains. If we drive anywhere and need to buy something for the house, we write off the miles, we write off the purchase. We pay water for both sides, so half of that is deductible. Home office exemption, if we have someone coming out to do yard work or pest control, half of that is written off. So there are tax benefits to it.
So, and a last question, what if, hypothetically, I have 8 people in my family? Can we still do this?
If you're all happy to live under one roof, absolutely. Now, you could also, 8 people in the family, you could help all your, so let's say there's 8 people. Well, how about 4? Because I have 4 fingers, that's easier. This group could buy one, and then this one could buy one, then this one could buy one, then this one could buy one. And if you all just, what is that called, Daniel? A syndication? Do you have any experience with that? You could figure out some sort of syndication arrangement to where you build up a portfolio of these properties, and you all just buy them individually with these low down payments, and then you feed them into a collective fund to where you all reap the rewards on it.
Yeah, you probably could just buy them and hold them in a portfolio and finance them together.
That gets tricky with buying, now we're talking getting into buying properties in an LLC sort of stuff. But yeah, there's lots of creative ways if you have a big family, especially if everybody's, employed. If you have kids, then yeah, you just have to be comfortable living in a house with all 8 of you under the same roof in the same area or in the same household.
All right. Hey, everybody that's online, can you take yourselves off of mute and say thank you to Chase for coming in and talking to us today?
Thanks, Chase.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Chase.
That was
amazing. Thank you, Chase.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and happy for the opportunity to be invited back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll be back next week on Friday. And we're going to be talking with Brandy Shotwell, who is a commercial lender who's going to talk to us 3 days after the Fed meeting about interest rates. So we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Really appreciate everybody's time.
Cheers.